The rain tapped gently against the windows of the small corner cafe, casting silver ripples on the sidewalk outside. Warm amber lights glowed overhead, giving the space a cozy hum that contrasted with the chill outside. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and espresso. Jackson Morgan sat at a corner table near the window, dressed in a plain charcoal hoodie and dark jeans. He looked like any regular man waiting out the storm, but behind his calm exterior sat a man with more wealth than most could imagine. A billionaire CEO who had built an empire, yet had grown weary of being seen only for his money. Beside him, a little girl sat on her knees on the cushioned bench, focused entirely on the small paint kit and paper in front of her. Harper, his 3-year-old daughter with golden curls and bright blue eyes, was humming softly as she mixed yellow and pink together. Jackson's fingers drummed against the wooden table, his eyes drifting between his daughter's artwork and the cafe door. This was his 6th blind date in 3 weeks. Each one had ended with forced smiles and subtle glances at watches or worse questions about his job, his house, or the kind of car he drove. And all of them had looked uncomfortable when Harper reached for their hands with paint-smudged fingers. "You are making a mess, little artist." Jackson brushed a dot of paint from her cheek. "It's a rainbow dinosaur, Daddy." She giggled, adding a streak of blue to the already colorful blob. "They never look at me. Only at you." Her words landed like a stone in his chest. Even at 3, she noticed. Jackson's throat tightened as memories rushed back, his wife's gentle hands guiding Harper's first finger, painting her, laughter filling their home. 3 years since her sudden illness took her away, leaving them both adrift in a world that seemed determined to value all the wrong things. The cafe door opened with a small bell's chime. Jackson looked up reflexively, straightening his posture. She stepped inside, quietly closing her umbrella with care. Her blonde hair was damp at the edges, framing a soft, fresh face. She wore a simple cream sweater, jeans, and worn white sneakers. No flashy purse, no exaggerated makeup, just a quiet presence that somehow commanded attention through its genuine nature. "Jackson," her voice carried across the room as she approached his table. "Yes," Jackson stood, extending his hand. "Olivia." She smiled, her eyes crinkling slightly at the corners. "Sorry I'm a bit late. The train was slow in the rain. No problem at all. Please have a seat." As Olivia settled into the chair across from him, her eyes went straight to Harper, who was now eyeing her curiously from the side. The little girl's paintbrush hovered midair, dripping a small purple dot onto the table. "And who is this beautiful artist?" Olivia's voice softened as she addressed Harper directly. Harper perked up, paintbrush still clutched in her tiny fist. "I'm Harper. I'm painting a dinosaur." Olivia leaned in closer, her elbows resting on the edge of the table, completely ignoring Jackson for the moment. "A rainbow dinosaur, that's the most magical kind." Harper's face broke into a wide grin. "Do you want to help?" Jackson blinked, surprised. No one had ever asked to engage with Harper first, not like this. The other women had awkwardly acknowledged his daughter with tight smiles before turning their attention fully to him. But Olivia hadn't even glanced at the menu, let alone asked about his job. She was fully focused on the small girl sitting between them. Olivia reached out and dipped a finger in the yellow paint. "Only if I get to paint the sunshine behind him." The 3 of them laughed softly, and for the first time in a while, Jackson felt his guard lowering just a little. They talked gently over the next 15 minutes. Jackson told her he worked in tech, left it vague. She nodded and asked nothing more. Instead, she asked Harper what her favorite color was, what book she liked best. She even wiped Harper's nose gently when the little girl sneezed without missing a beat in their conversation about dinosaur habitats. And then Olivia glanced at her watch. Her smile faded, a shadow crossing her face. "I'm really sorry." She stood suddenly, gathering her small bag. "I have to go." Jackson rose quickly. Confusion etched across his features. "Is everything all right?" She hesitated, fingers tightening around her bag strap. "It's just something urgent. I wish I could stay longer. I really do." He watched her collect her umbrella, and a rush of something unexpected surged through him. Fear not of being alone again, but of letting go of the first person who had not looked at him with calculation, who had laughed with his daughter before even asking his last name. His hand reached out, gently touching her wrist. "Don't leave." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "You're the only one who came." She looked down at where his fingers brushed her skin, surprised, her eyes flicking up to meet his. Something unspoken passed between them. Warmth, curiosity, and the faintest pull of fate, but she still withdrew her hand gently. I'm sorry, I have to. Her voice held genuine regret. Maybe another time. Before he could answer, she was gone. The bell above the door marking her departure as surely as it had announced her arrival. Harper looked up from her painting, now dotted with yellow sunlight behind the colorful creature. I like her, Daddy. She didn't look at her phone. She made my dinosaur fly. Later that evening, the rain had softened into a mist. The city shimmered under wet streetlights as Jackson tucked Harper into bed in their penthouse apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the glittering skyline, a stark contrast to the modest cafe they'd visited earlier. Harper was still clutching the napkin Olivia had used to draw a tiny dinosaur beside her rainbow creation. Did you like Olivia? Jackson smoothed the blanket over her small form. She was kind. Harper nodded sleepily. She talked to me, not just you. He sat by her for a while, watching her chest rise and fall with each peaceful breath. But his mind was elsewhere, still replaying that moment in the cafe. Olivia's eyes, her voice, the way she held Harper's tiny paintbrush like it was something precious. She had not asked what he did. She had not tried to impress or flirt. She had just been there. And then she left. No excuses, no business cards, no follow-up, just vanished. The penthouse felt emptier than usual that night as Jackson moved through his evening routine. His footsteps echoed on the marble floors past the minimalist furniture selected by his interior designer. Everything pristine, everything expensive, everything meaningless. The only spots of color came from Harper's toys and drawings, bright interruptions in the monochrome perfection. He paused at his home office, the door sliding open silently at his approach. Inside, a single photo sat on the otherwise immaculate desk. Himself, Harper, and Catherine, his late wife, their faces bright with laughter during a beach vacation 3 years ago. 2 months before the diagnosis. 4 months before she was gone. Jackson Morgan was one of the most powerful tech entrepreneurs in the country. His company, Phoenix Horizon, had revolutionized cloud security and AI-driven architecture. With a net worth that earned him spots on magazine covers and headlines, he was the kind of man people Googled before meetings and whispered about in elevators. But behind closed doors, Jackson lived differently. The luxury cars were hidden in a private garage. The penthouse only opened to a select few, and every weekend he dressed down and became someone else. Just a father taking his daughter to the park, or a man trying to find someone who could love him without the zeros attached to his name. Since Catherine passed away, his world had shrunk to Harper and work. Friends faded. Conversations became transactional. And love. It felt like a myth told to people who still believed in magic. But today had felt different. Morning arrived with harsh clarity, sunlight streaming through the windows where Jackson had forgotten to close the blinds. His alarm hadn't gone off yet, but he was already awake, staring at the ceiling. Wednesday, board meeting, quarterly projections, security protocol updates. The weight of Phoenix Horizon pressing down before he'd even left his bed. Daddy Harper stood in the doorway, stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. Are we seeing Olivia today? No, sweetie. He sat up, running a hand through his hair. She had to go. Remember, the boardroom of Phoenix Horizon occupied the entire top floor of a gleaming downtown skyscraper. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, though few ever paused to appreciate them. Today, 12 executives sat around a massive glass table, tablets, and holographic displays flickering with data streams. Jackson stood at the head, his charcoal suit impeccably tailored, his presence commanding attention without effort. The security breach in Sector 7 is contained, but it exposed weaknesses in our quantum encryption protocol. Jackson's voice carried easily across the room. I want a complete overhaul by end of quarter. Across the city, in a modest apartment with faded wallpaper and mismatched furniture. Olivia Bennett closed the door of her apartment and dropped her bag on the couch with a sigh. Her clothes were damp from the morning drizzle, and her heart still beat too fast from rushing. I made it, she called softly, stepping into the bedroom. A frail voice answered from the bed. You're late, I know. I'm sorry. Olivia sat beside the girl, brushing back damp strands of dark blonde hair. Her younger sister, Abigail, had been in and out of the hospital for months now. Last night had been another emergency, a sudden spike in fever. Olivia had raced from the cafe to the hospital, holding her breath the entire train ride. Did he seem nice? Abigail asked, her eyes closed, voice weak but curious. Olivia smiled faintly. He was surprising. Do you like him? I barely know him. Olivia busied herself arranging medications on the nightstand. But you know I left fast. She had grown up fast. After their parents divorced, her father had moved out of state, and her mother slowly withdrew into herself. Olivia took over the late-night medicine runs, doctor appointments, homework, and lullabies. Love for her had always come second to responsibility. And when she walked into that cafe and saw a man with a child, something about it felt familiar. Not intimidating, not exhausting, just familiar. But she had promised herself never to talk about Abigail on a first date. It felt like too much, too heavy. She didn't want pity. She wanted connection. Still, when Jackson had grabbed her hand and said those words, "You're the only one who came," something deep inside her had stirred. She had almost stayed. Almost. The bookstore where Olivia worked was a small, independent shop tucked between a coffee house and a vintage record store. Shelves crowded with books created narrow aisles that twisted through the space like a literary maze. The air smelled of paper and possibility, a scent that had always made Olivia feel at home even on her worst days. She stood on a small stepladder reshelving returns in the classics section when her coworker Kimberly approached. "So did Mr. Blind Date call again?" Kimberly leaned against the bookshelf, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against a copy of Jane Eyre. Olivia slid another book into place. "No, why would he? I ran out on him." "You know he could Google you, right? Find the store." Kimberly raised an eyebrow. "If he was interested enough." "That's not how real connections work." Olivia climbed down from the ladder. "Besides, I didn't give him my last name." The truth was a small part of her hoped he might try to find her. The way he had looked at her when she left the genuine connection she'd felt with Harper, it was rare enough to linger in her thoughts. But her life had no room for maybes. Between Abigail's lupus treatments work and their mounting medical bills, romance was a luxury she couldn't afford. Jackson sat in his private office staring at the name scrawled on a coffee receipt. Olivia. No last name, no phone number, just Olivia. His executive assistant had already cleared his afternoon meetings without question, one of the benefits of being the boss. But finding one woman named Olivia in a city of millions, even with his resources, it was challenging. He'd started with the basics, checking nearby bookstores since she'd mentioned loving literature during their brief conversation. There were dozens within a reasonable radius of the cafe. He'd narrowed it by independent stores since her sweater had featured a small pin from a local literacy project that typically partnered with independent booksellers. 3 days. That's how long it took him to identify 7 possible bookstores. Another day to discreetly have his security team check employee listings. 2 more to gather the courage to actually go. "What am I doing?" Jackson muttered to himself as he parked his least ostentatious car, a simple gray sedan, a block from read between the lines the 5th bookstore on his list. Harper sat in her car seat, kicking her feet against the back of his seat. "Are we seeing rainbow dinosaur ladies?" she asked, clutching the small bouquet of daisies they'd picked up on the way. "We're going to try, sweetheart." Jackson helped her unbuckle. "But she might not be here, so don't get too excited." "Okay." Even as he said it, he knew he was the one who needed tempering of expectations. The rational part of his brain, the part that had built a tech empire from the ground up, knew this was ridiculous. Chasing after a woman he'd spent less than 20 minutes with, a woman who'd left suddenly. But something about Olivia had reached past the CEO, past the widower, and touched the man who still believed in possibilities. They stood outside the small bookstore hand in hand. Through the window, Jackson could see shelves upon shelves of books, a few customers browsing quietly, and then his heart jumped. A flash of blonde hair as someone moved behind the counter. Ready, he looked down at Harper, who nodded solemnly, clutching her flowers. The bell above the door jingled as they entered. The woman behind the counter looked up, and Jackson felt both relief and nervousness rush through him at once. It was her. Olivia's eyes widened slightly in surprise, then softened as they landed on Harper. "You came to find me?" Her voice held wonder rather than accusation. Jackson shifted his weight, suddenly feeling like a teenager rather than a billionaire CEO. "I wanted to apologize." He offered the flowers. Harper thrust forward. "For grabbing your hand, for not stopping you when you left. For..." He trailed off, unsure how to finish. Olivia stepped out from behind the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes went to Harper, who was smiling up at her shyly. "Hi, Olivia." The little girl said, her voice small but clear. "We brought flowers." Olivia knelt to Harper's level, a gentle smile spreading across her face. "You remembered my name." "Rainbow dinosaurs never forget," Harper replied proudly. Olivia laughed, the sound warm and genuine. She glanced back at Jackson, who was watching them both with quiet hope. "Okay." She stood brushing off her knees. Dinner, they chose a quiet family restaurant, the kind with the colorful menus and kids' crayons at every table. Harper sat between them happily coloring as Olivia read the menu aloud in funny voices that made the little girl giggle uncontrollably. Jackson watched them, something tight in his chest slowly unwinding. "You're good with her," Jackson observed as the waiter left with their orders. Grilled cheese for Harper, pasta for Olivia, and a burger for himself. "I like kids," Olivia replied simply. "They're honest. They don't try to impress you or pretend to be something they're not." Unlike adults, Jackson raised an eyebrow. Exactly unlike adults. She smiled, and there was something in her expression that made him want to tell her everything. About Phoenix Horizon, about his real home, about the weight of living two lives. Instead, he asked about her favorite books, and the conversation flowed easily from there. Olivia told them about her childhood library adventures. Jackson asked Harper to share her new obsession with frogs. Laughter came naturally, like the three of them had done this many times before. Their food arrived steaming and aromatic, and Harper immediately reached for Olivia's hand to say grace, a tradition Catherine had started and Jackson had maintained. But just as they bowed their heads, a sharp voice broke the moment. It's Sophie. They turned to see a woman in a sleek blazer and high heels approaching their table. Her name tag read, Kimberly, Assistant Manager. She worked at the bookstore too. "Hi, Kimberly." Olivia stiffened slightly, her hand still holding Harper's. Kimberly looked between Jackson and Harper, then back to Olivia, her expression shifting from surprise to something more calculating. "Is this the guy you mentioned, the blind date?" Jackson offered a polite smile but said nothing. "I thought you were joking," Kimberly continued, her voice louder now. "No offense, I just figured you'd go for someone a little more together." Olivia blinked. "Excuse me," Kimberly leaned in, mock whispering. "You know, less hoodie, more ambition. A single dad, too. That's a lot to take on." Harper looked up confused. "What's a lot?" Jackson's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Olivia reached over and took Harper's other hand, completing their small circle. "He's a great dad." Her tone was even but firm. "That's all I care about." Kimberly blinked, caught off guard. "I didn't mean—" "You meant exactly what you said." Olivia replied, her voice calm but her gaze unflinching. "Enjoy your evening." Kimberly muttered something and walked off her heels, clicking sharply as she disappeared. Jackson stared at Olivia. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." She brushed a lock of hair behind her ear. "But I wanted to." He looked at her for a long moment, then at Harper, who was now drawing a heart on her placemat. Something in his chest shifted, something real, something steady. He had spent years building walls, testing people, hiding behind plain clothes and false simplicity. But Olivia had just looked through all of it and stayed. Autumn settled into the city like a soft blanket, crisp air, golden leaves, and the scent of roasted chestnuts from street vendors. Over the next few weeks, Jackson and Olivia began to drift into each other's days more naturally. What had started as a second-chance dinner slowly became a quiet, unfolding routine. They took Harper to the park on Saturdays, where Olivia helped her build elaborate leaf castles and pretended to be a princess guarding a squirrel kingdom. On Wednesday nights, they cooked dinner at Olivia's apartment, always with the excuse that she wanted to show Harper how to make something special. Mac and cheese with broccoli trees became the little girl's favorite, and more than once they spent rainy afternoons sprawled on the living room rug of Jackson's carefully nondescript apartment, not his penthouse, a separate place he kept for his ordinary life building puzzles, that somehow always ended with Harper declaring herself the winner even when pieces were missing. Jackson hadn't felt this kind of ease in years. Olivia's presence was like warm light filling in the empty corners of his life. She never asked for more than what was offered, never pried into things he wasn't ready to reveal. But that somehow made it harder because the truth loomed larger with every laugh, every shared story, every quiet moment when their hands touched and lingered just a second too long. She thought he worked in tech, which technically wasn't a lie, but he knew the truth mattered. And hiding it, his wealth, his title, the empire behind the man she thought she knew, began to feel heavier with every passing day. One evening, as Harper colored by the window and Olivia folded laundry on the couch, Jackson watched them from the kitchen. The domesticity of the scene struck him physically like a blow to the chest. This was what he wanted, this simple, honest connection, and he was poisoning it with his secrets. Olivia caught his gaze and smiled a soft, knowing look that made his heart clench. He almost told her right then. Almost. But the words got stuck somewhere behind his ribs, trapped by fear. "What are you thinking about so seriously over there?" Olivia called, placing a neatly folded towel on the pile beside her. "Just that I'm happy." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The partial honesty felt like sand in his mouth. The next afternoon, Olivia was shelving new books at the shop when Kimberly called out from the register, her voice carrying across the quiet store. "Hey, Olivia, this guy in the tech article looks just like your mystery man." Olivia walked over, her curiosity piqued. Kimberly turned her tablet around. It was a profile piece from a business magazine's archives, 2 years old, but the photo was clear. Jackson, clean-shaven, sharp navy suit, standing in front of a wall of servers. The headline read, "Inside Phoenix Horizon, the reclusive tech billionaire who changed the future of AI." Olivia's breath caught. The company name was partially blurred by a pop-up ad, but the face was unmistakable. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the counter. "That him?" Kimberly raised an eyebrow, watching Olivia's expression carefully. Olivia said nothing, her mind racing. The hoodie, the modest apartment, the vague answers about his job. It had all been deliberate, a lie, or at least a carefully constructed omission. She thought back to their conversations, analyzing each for hidden meanings or tests. Had any of it been real? Was she just another experiment for a bored billionaire? She left work early that day, her thoughts spinning. The train ride home felt interminable, each stop bringing a new wave of confusion and hurt. Had he lied to her from the beginning? Was everything, the cafe, the hoodie, the way he looked at her, just an act? And if it wasn't a game, why not tell her? By the time she reached her apartment, anger had settled into a cold knot in her stomach. She looked around at her modest home, the second-hand furniture, the piles of medical bills on the counter, the faded curtains they couldn't afford to replace, and felt foolish. Of course, someone like Jackson Morgan wouldn't really be interested in someone like her. Not for anything real. When her phone rang that evening, Jackson's name lighting up the screen, she didn't answer. Or the next call, or the one after that. By the end of the week, he stood outside her bookstore, hands in his pockets, eyes searching through the window. But Olivia stayed in the back room, watching him through the tiny pane of glass in the office door, until he eventually walked away, shoulders slumped in defeat. That night, Jackson sat on the edge of Harper's bed, trying to hide the heaviness in his chest. The little girl's room was a splash of color in the otherwise monochromatic penthouse. Walls painted sky blue with clouds, shelves overflowing with books and toys, a nightlight casting star shapes across the ceiling. Daddy, Harper asked, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. Did Olivia leave us?" His breath caught. For a moment, he couldn't speak the innocent question, laying bare all his fears. He smoothed her hair back, swallowed hard, and whispered, "I don't know, Harper. I hope not." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure what hurt more, the ache in his own heart or the confusion in hers, because losing Olivia now felt like losing something they had only just begun to believe in. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the wooden floors of the bookstore. It was quiet, only the rustle of pages and the soft hum of a ceiling fan overhead. Olivia stood behind the counter, pretending to read a shipment invoice, but her eyes hadn't moved from the same line in over 10 minutes. Her mind was elsewhere, still tangled in that article, in Jackson's face, in everything that suddenly felt uncertain. Then the door opened, bell jingling softly. She looked up, heart jumping, before she even registered his face. Jackson stood in the doorway, wearing the same plain hoodie, the same jeans, but this time he didn't try to smile. He simply looked at her, his expression tired, real. "Hey." His voice was quiet, barely carrying across the empty store. Olivia's hands froze on the paper in front of her. "You found the article. I didn't mean for you to find out like that." He stepped inside slowly, letting the door close behind him. "But I knew it would happen eventually." She waited, her expression unreadable. Jackson exhaled heavily. "My name is Jackson Morgan. I'm the CEO of Phoenix Horizon. Yes, the company in the article." Yes, the one with the servers and the headlines and the billions? He paused, running a hand through his hair. But the man in that suit, he's not the one who takes Harper to the park. He's not the one who laughs when she draws rainbows on the walls. That version of me exists for business, for boardrooms and negotiations. But it's not the man I wanted you to meet. Olivia said nothing, her fingers tracing the edge of the counter. I've tried dating as that guy. Jackson continued, his voice low. It never worked. People saw the money first, and some tried really hard to say they weren't, but you could feel it. Every question, every glance. He looked her in the eyes, now steady. So I stopped leading with the truth. Not to manipulate anyone, just to level the ground to see who would show up if there were no spotlights. She still didn't speak. He took a breath and added gently, and you came. You sat down and you made Harper laugh. You never once asked what I did for a living. Olivia finally looked up from her hands. So did I pass your test? No, he said, immediately taking a step forward. It was never a test. I was just a man hoping to meet someone who would care about Harper first. And I did. The silence stretched between them. The ceiling fan continued its slow rhythm above. A customer browsed quietly in the far corner, oblivious to the tension near the front. Finally, Olivia lifted her eyes to meet his fully. I wasn't angry because you're rich, she said, her voice soft but clear. I was angry because I liked you, and I thought maybe you liked me too. And when people lie, especially people who live in a different world, it makes it hard to know what's real. Jackson stepped closer, close enough that he could have reached out and touched her, but he kept his hands at his sides. I do like you. I care about you, Olivia. I just got scared. Scared that if I told you the truth, you'd walk away. I almost did, she admitted. Why didn't you? She looked toward the children's corner where Harper had once sat cross-legged with a storybook in her lap. A faint smile tugged at her lips. Because when I looked at Harper, she whispered, I realized I'd already fallen in love with both of you. Jackson's breath hitched. He moved forward, closing the distance between them, taking her hands in his. I don't want to hide anything anymore. No more tests, no more half-truths, just me and Harper, and whatever this could be. If you still want it. Olivia squeezed his hand gently. I think I do. The world outside the bookstore continued its hurried pace. Cars honking, people rushing, the endless flow of a city that never slowed down. But inside, time seemed to pause as two people who had been hiding parts of themselves finally stood in the full light of truth. It wasn't perfect, and there would be more to explain, more to understand. But it was real, and for now, that was enough. Fall had painted the city in amber and gold. Morning sunlight slanted through the bookstore windows, catching dust motes that danced in the air like tiny constellations. Olivia moved between the shelves, rearranging a display of seasonal reads, her mind still processing the revelation from the previous day. Jackson Morgan, billionaire CEO, the man who had carefully constructed an alternate life just to find something genuine. A text message lit up her phone. Would you like to see where I really live? The question hung there, loaded with implications. This wasn't just about a different apartment. It was an invitation into his actual world, the one he'd kept hidden. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Yes, she finally typed, but I need to bring Abigail. If we're doing truth, you should meet her too. The drive to Jackson's penthouse took them through progressively more exclusive neighborhoods. Buildings grew taller, sleeker, more imposing. Olivia sat in the passenger seat of Jackson's real car, a luxury electric vehicle with butter-soft leather seats, while Abigail gazed out the window from the back next to Harper, who chatted excitedly about showing her room to their guests. Olivia's hand tightened around her worn leather bag. Her sister's medical bills had piled up that morning. Another treatment, another specialist, another mountain to climb. And here she was being driven to a billionaire's home, feeling increasingly like she'd stumbled into someone else's life story. You're quiet. Jackson's eyes stayed on the road, but his attention wrapped around her like a warm blanket. I'm adjusting. This is, a lot to take in. Olivia watched as they pulled into a private underground garage beneath a gleaming skyscraper. The elevator required a fingerprint and retinal scan. Harper bounced on her toes as they ascended, pointing out to Abigail that they were going all the way to the sky. When the doors opened, Olivia felt her breath catch. The penthouse spread before them, vast, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city that stretched to the horizon. Minimalist furniture in soft grays and whites created an atmosphere of restrained luxury. Abstract art pieces worth more than her entire life savings hung on walls that seemed to go on forever. Harper raced ahead. "Come see my room." She grabbed Abigail's hand, pulling her down a hallway, leaving Jackson and Olivia standing in the cavernous living room. "This is you," Olivia turned slowly, taking it all in. "The real you. Part of me." Jackson moved to stand beside her at the window. "The business part. But the man who sat with you in the team, who built leaf castles with Harper in the park. That's the real me too." Olivia's fingers pressed against the cool glass, the city sprawling beneath them like a living map. They existed in such different worlds. Hers medical bills, second-hand furniture, counting pennies for Abigail's medications. His this panoramic view, this wealth beyond comprehension, this power. "Does it scare you?" Jackson's voice softened as he watched her expression. "Not the money." Her eyes met his reflection in the glass. "The distance, there's so much space between your life and mine." His hand found hers against the window. "Then we'll have to build a bridge." Down the hall, Harper's laughter echoed, followed by a softer sound. Abigail's giggle, something Olivia hadn't heard in weeks. Perhaps the construction had already begun. In the weeks that followed, Jackson's dual worlds began to merge. He introduced Olivia to his executive assistant, his head of security, his closest colleagues. Each meeting carried the weight of scrutiny. She felt their assessment in every glance, every carefully phrased question. Was she worthy of their boss? Was she after his money? What made her different from the others? Olivia maintained her job at the bookstore, refused Jackson's offers of financial help, and kept her small apartment. Independence mattered. Authenticity mattered. She wouldn't be absorbed into his world without maintaining her own. They developed a rhythm, weeknights at her place, weekends at his. Harper's toys began to accumulate in Olivia's apartment, while books from Olivia's collection found homes on Jackson's shelves. Abigail's health stabilized enough for her to join them more often, her quiet presence a grounding force amid the whirlwind of their merging lives. But reality had a way of asserting itself at unexpected moments. The emergency call came on a Tuesday evening. Olivia had just finished closing the bookstore when her phone lit up with her mother's number. Abigail had collapsed during a college campus tour. Fever, inflammation. The lupus flaring again with vicious intensity. The hospital corridor stretched endlessly, its sterile white walls and antiseptic smell all too familiar. Olivia paced outside the treatment room. Her steps measured, her breathing deliberate. The specialist had been clear. Abigail needed a more aggressive treatment protocol. Experimental, expensive. Insurance would cover part, but the remainder would consume every penny Olivia had saved and then some. Jackson appeared at the end of the hallway, his usual confident stride replaced by uncertainty. He'd left a board meeting the moment she called. "How is she stabilized?" Olivia's voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "But they want to try a new treatment approach. It's promising, but..." The cost hung between them, unspoken but looming. "Let me help." Jackson moved closer, hands outstretched. She stepped back, spine straightening. "I can't take your money, Jackson." Why not? His frustration broke through his carefully maintained composure. "I have more than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Why can't I use it to help someone I care about? Because then this, us, becomes a transaction." Olivia's words came out sharper than intended. "I need to know that what's between us isn't about what you can give me or what I need from you. I need it to be about who we are to each other." Jackson ran a hand through his hair, disheveled from the rushed exit from his meeting. "So you'll struggle when there's no need. Abigail will suffer because of pride." His words hit like physical blows, but Olivia held her ground. "It's not pride, it's self-preservation. If I let you solve this problem, what happens to the next one? And the one after that? At what point do I stop being a partner and it become a responsibility?" They parted that night with tension thick between them, neither willing to bend. Jackson returned to his penthouse, pacing the vast, empty space, frustrated by the barriers Olivia maintained. Olivia stayed at the hospital, curled uncomfortably in a chair beside Abigail's bed, equally frustrated by Jackson's inability to understand her need for independence. The next morning, Eleanor Chen knocked on Abigail's hospital room door. Olivia, barely awake after a fitful night's sleep, looked up in confusion. Dr. Chen wasn't Abigail's regular physician. I've been reviewing your sister's case. Chen consulted her tablet. We have a clinical trial starting next month that might be perfect for Abigail's condition. State-of-the-art immunotherapy approach. We've seen remarkable results in similar cases. Olivia straightened, immediately alert. A clinical trial. But Abigail's been rejected from those before. Her condition isn't rare enough, or it's too complicated, or this one's different. We're specifically looking for complex presentations of lupus. Dr. Chen smiled. And I believe Abigail would be an excellent candidate. Something about the timing nagged at Olivia. How did you find us? Dr. Chen hesitated for a fraction of a second. Your sister's case was flagged in our system as a potential match. For 3 days, Olivia wrestled with suspicion. The coincidence seemed too perfect. A world-renowned specialist suddenly interested in Abigail's case right after her argument with Jackson. She dug deeper, researching Dr. Chen, the clinical trial, looking for connections. When she found it, a research foundation with Phoenix Horizon as its principal donor, the pieces clicked into place. Jackson had orchestrated this, not with money directly to her, but through his influence, his connections. He'd found a way around her refusal. The Phoenix Horizon offices occupied the top 10 floors of a gleaming tower in the financial district. Olivia had never visited before, had purposely kept this part of Jackson's life separate from their relationship. Now she stood in the soaring lobby, out of place in her bookstore clothes, among the sleek professionals hurrying past. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly when Olivia requested to see Jackson Morgan. No appointment, no credentials, just determination written across her face. I'll need to see if Mr. Morgan is available. The woman's perfectly manicured fingers hovered over her keyboard. Tell him it's about Dr. Chen's clinical trial. Olivia's voice remained steady despite the storm brewing inside. Minutes later, she was escorted into an elevator that required a special key card. The doors opened directly into Jackson's executive suite, a vast space of glass and brushed steel with views that made even his penthouse seem modest by comparison. He stood behind his desk, suit impeccable expression, carefully neutral. You had no right. Olivia's words cut through the rarefied air. I told you I didn't want your financial help. I didn't give you money. Jackson remained behind his desk as if the barrier might protect him from her anger. Don't, Olivia stepped forward. Don't pretend this isn't exactly what we argued about. You used your influence to get Abigail into that trial. I used my resources to help someone I care about. Jackson's professional mask slipped, revealing the man beneath. Frustrated, worried, desperate to make things right. What was I supposed to do? Watch you struggle when I could fix it? Watch Abigail suffer. It wasn't your problem to fix, Olivia's voice echoed off the glass walls. This is exactly what I was afraid of. The imbalance, the power dynamic. You thinking you know better than me. What's best for my family? Jackson moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. This isn't about power, it's about love. I love you, Olivia. I love Abigail because she matters to you. Why is that so hard to accept? The word love hung in the air between them, spoken for the first time. It should have been a moment of tenderness, of connection. Instead, it landed amid conflict, its edges sharp and dangerous. Olivia stepped back, her anger faltering. Because love without respect isn't love at all. It's possession. It's control. And I've spent my entire life fighting to maintain control of the few things I can. Jackson's shoulders sagged, the fight draining from him. What do you want me to do? Call Dr. Chen and tell her to remove Abigail from consideration. Would that make this right? The absurdity of the situation suddenly struck Olivia. Standing in this office worth millions, arguing about refusing help that could save her sister's life. I don't know what right looks like anymore. For a week, they existed in painful limbo. Jackson didn't call. Olivia didn't reach out. Harper asked about her daily confusion and hurt in her little voice when Jackson explained that Olivia was busy with Abigail. Only partly a lie. Abigail had begun preliminary testing for the clinical trial, a process Olivia had decided to allow despite her reservations. Her sister's health outweighed her pride. Then on a rainy Tuesday, a small envelope arrived at the bookstore, addressed to Olivia in Harper's uneven handwriting. Inside was a crayon drawing, 4 figures holding hands under a rainbow. My family written across the top in purple crayon. Harper had drawn herself holding hands with Jackson on one side and Olivia on the other. Beside Olivia stood another figure labeled Abby with a crooked heart above her head. Olivia stared at the drawing, tears blurring her vision. The simplicity of a child's perspective cut through the complexity of adult conflicts. In Harper's world, they were already a family, broken pieces, finding wholeness together. That evening, she called Jackson. Can we talk? They met on neutral ground, a small park halfway between their two worlds. Autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet as they walked side by side, not touching the space between them, filled with unspoken words. I'm sorry. Jackson broke the silence first. I should have respected your boundaries. I just, I have all these resources, all this power in the business world, and I couldn't use any of it to help the person I love. It felt like failure. Olivia stopped, turning to face him. I'm sorry too. I've been so focused on maintaining independence that I forgot partnerships mean letting someone help sometimes. Abigail is staying in the trial. She needs it, and I'd be a fool to refuse because of my own issues. Jackson reached for her hand hesitantly, as if expecting her to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers intertwined with hers. So where does that leave us? Somewhere in the middle, I think. Building that bridge. Olivia squeezed his hand. But we need clearer boundaries. Ways to keep our relationship balanced despite the differences in our situations. I can work with that. Relief washed over Jackson's features, the tension he'd carried for days finally easing. I've missed you. Harper has too. I've missed you both. Olivia's thumb traced circles on his palm. And I've been thinking, maybe it's time I met your parents. The Morgan family estate sprawled across several acres just outside the city limits. A Victorian mansion meticulously restored and modernized, surrounded by gardens that even in autumn maintained their structured beauty. Olivia stood in the circular driveway, taking in the grandeur that had shaped Jackson's childhood. Another piece of him revealed another layer to understand. Harper bounded up the steps ahead of them, familiar with her grandparents' home. Jackson placed a steadying hand at the small of Olivia's back, his touch conveying support. They aren't as intimidating as all this suggests. The door opened before they reached it. An elegant woman in her 60s stood in the entrance, her silver-streaked hair swept into a classic updo, her smile warm as she bent to scoop up Harper in a hug. Eleanor Morgan's eyes found Olivia over her granddaughter's head, curiosity and assessment mingling in her gaze. You must be Olivia. We've heard so much about you. Eleanor extended her hand, her grip firm and confident. Welcome to our home. David Morgan appeared behind his wife, tall and distinguished with the same intense eyes as his son. He greeted Olivia with reserved politeness, a man clearly accustomed to evaluating people quickly and thoroughly. Lunch stretched across 2 hours in a sun-dappled conservatory overlooking the gardens. Questions flowed naturally, but Olivia felt the undercurrent. They were protective of their son, wary of his heart being broken again after Catherine's death, cautious about the stark differences in their backgrounds. So you work at a bookstore? David's tone remained pleasant, but the question carried weight. Have you always been interested in literature? Actually, I was studying English literature at Columbia before I had to withdraw. Olivia kept her voice even, refusing to be diminished. I had a full academic scholarship. Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly. Columbia. What necessitated your withdrawal, if I may ask? My sister's health took priority. Olivia's chin lifted slightly. Family comes first. Something shifted in Eleanor's expression. Respect, perhaps, or recognition of a shared value. Indeed, it does. By the time they departed, something fundamental had changed. Not acceptance, not yet, but the beginning of understanding. Eleanor had taken Olivia aside before they left, showing her Catherine's favorite spot in the garden, a small bench beneath a Japanese maple. It was an olive branch, an acknowledgement of Olivia's place in their son's life. The weekend retreat came as a surprise. Jackson's suggestion after weeks of increased stress. Olivia had been juggling Abigail's treatments, bookstore shifts, and their relationship. The clinical trial showed promising results, but the demanding schedule left everyone exhausted. A few days away from the city, from responsibilities, from the constant navigation between their different worlds seemed like exactly what they needed. The cabin nestled beside a still lake, its stone chimney and wraparound porch picture perfect against the backdrop of autumn foliage. Inside, rustic luxury created a cocoon of comfort, a massive stone fireplace, plush furniture, a kitchen stocked with everything they could need. Simpler than the penthouse, more authentic somehow, as if here Jackson could fully be himself without either of his usual personas. Harper claimed the loft bedroom, immediately racing up the spiral staircase to arrange her stuffed animals on the quilted bed. Abigail, well enough to join them, but still tired, easily settled on the porch swing with a book wrapped in a soft blanket against the crisp air. Olivia stood at the edge of the lake, breathing in the scent of pine and clean water. Jackson approached from behind, his footsteps crunching on fallen leaves. "This is beautiful," she turned to face him. "Is it yours?" "It was my grandfather's." Jackson picked up a smooth stone, turning it over in his hands. He built it himself, no contractors, no designers, just his hands and his vision. "When the company started taking off, I'd come here to remember what matters, to reconnect with something real." Olivia studied his profile against the light dancing off the water. "You're different here, more yourself." Jackson skipped the stone across the lake's surface, watching it bounce 4 times before disappearing. "That's why I wanted to bring you here. No penthouses, no bookstores, just us without all the trappings that complicate things." The morning dawned clear and golden, the kind of perfect fall day that seemed designed for appreciation. After breakfast, they spread a picnic blanket beneath a towering oak tree at the meadow's edge. Olivia cradled a warm cup of cider between her hands, watching Harper chase a bright red ball through the open field. Jackson stood nearby, occasionally stooping to collect a particularly vibrant leaf for the forest queen crown Harper had insisted on making. "You really know how to plan a getaway." Olivia looked over her shoulder at Jackson, squinting against the sunlight filtering through the amber leaves above. Jackson shrugged, his smile soft at the edges. "I just follow Harper's lead. If there are trees, grass, and something to chase, she's happy." Olivia laughed, tilting her head back slightly. "Well, she's not the only one." Her laughter cut short at Harper's delighted shriek. The little girl's ball had rolled down a gentle slope and bounced onto the narrow gravel road just beyond the meadow's edge. Before either adult could react, Harper bolted after it, her golden curl bouncing as she ran. Harper Jackson's voice cracked like thunder, sharp with panic. But Olivia was already moving. Her body reacted on pure instinct, cutting through the grass like a flash of light. A car appeared around the bend of the road, approaching far too quickly for the rural setting. Her heart thundered against her ribs as she closed the distance. In one swift motion, she reached Harper, scooped her up, and turned her body, shielding the child as they crashed into the ditch beside the road. The car honked violently and screeched to a halt, gravel spraying. It missed them by inches. Jackson reached them seconds later, dropping to his knees beside them, breath-ragged eyes wild with terror. "Are you okay, Harper?" Olivia. Olivia gasped for air, mud soaking her jeans, her elbow bleeding where she'd scraped it on a rock. But she held Harper tightly to her chest, the child's small body trembling against hers. "She's fine. She's safe, that's all that matters." Harper clung to her, crying into her shoulder, small fingers clutching Olivia's sweater with desperate strength. Jackson looked at Olivia, her torn sweater, her bleeding arm, her tangled hair, and something shifted inside him. Not just fear, not just gratitude, but something deeper, almost reverent. He pulled both of them into his arms, holding them close as the wind rushed over the field like a sigh of relief. He whispered Harper's name over and over, but his gaze never left Olivia's face, seeing her now with complete clarity. The woman who would throw herself into danger without hesitation to protect his child. That night, the world quieted around them. The fire crackled softly in the stone hearth, casting warm light over the cozy cabin. Harper lay asleep on the couch, nestled between 2 pillows, her stuffed bunny tucked beneath her chin. The day's trauma had exhausted her, but children's resilience had already begun to smooth over the fear. She'd made them promise to help her find a new ball tomorrow, one that doesn't run away to the road. Olivia sat at the kitchen table, her sleeve rolled up to reveal the scrape across her elbow, dried blood around the edges. Jackson crouched beside her with the first aid kit, his movements gentle as he cleaned the wound. She winced as the alcohol touched her skin. "You'd think I'd be used to scrapes by now." Years of taking care of Abigail had made her familiar with first aid. Jackson focused on carefully cleaning every speck of dirt from the abrasion. "You shouldn't have to be." Her eyes flicked to Harper, sleeping peacefully, then back to him. "I'd do it again. Every time." He didn't answer immediately, just held the gauze against her elbow, looking at her as if seeing something new in her face. "I know." With slow, precise movements, he wrapped the bandage around her arm. When he finished, he didn't let go. Instead, he turned her hand over, pressed a kiss to her palm, then to the back of her hand. "You're a part of us now." Olivia felt something catch in her chest, a emotion too large to contain. She looked into his eyes, warm and raw, full of everything they hadn't yet said. Her breath stilled. Because in that moment, with his fingers wrapped around hers and Harper's gentle breathing behind them, she understood this was no longer just a story about two different worlds colliding. This was love. This was home. This was real. The autumn stretched into winter. Snow dusted the city streets, holiday lights twinkled in windows, and their lives continued to intertwine in ways both expected and surprising. Abigail's health improved steadily with the new treatment protocol. She returned to college part-time, her strength gradually returning. The shadows that had haunted Olivia for years began to lift as her sister reclaimed independence. Jackson integrated Olivia more fully into his professional world, not as an accessory or a token, but as a partner whose perspective he valued. She attended selected company functions, met his most trusted colleagues, even offered insights on Phoenix Horizon's charitable foundation that led to a literacy initiative partnering with independent bookstores across the country. But beneath the surface of their growing happiness, currents of tension swirled. The board of directors at Phoenix Horizon had concerns about Jackson's divided attention. Rumors circulated in business circles about the CEO's distraction, the ordinary bookstore employee who had somehow captured his interest when so many more suitable matches had failed. The threat materialized on a snowy December morning. Jackson sat in his office reviewing quarterly projections when Marcus Whalen, his CFO and longest-serving board member, entered without knocking. The unusual breach of protocol immediately put Jackson on alert. "We need to talk about Nexus Technologies." Marcus placed a tablet on Jackson's desk, displaying financial charts with alarming downward trends. Their hostile takeover attempt is gaining traction. Three major shareholders have indicated willingness to sell if their offer increases by just 7%. Jackson studied the data mine, quickly calculating implications. That's still below market value. Why would our people sell? Marcus's expression hardened. Because they're losing confidence, Jackson. The company's innovation pipeline has slowed over the past quarter. Your focus has been elsewhere. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Your relationship is affecting your leadership. Jackson's jaw tightened. My personal life has nothing to do with Phoenix Horizon's performance. It does when it affects your judgment. Marcus leaned forward. The board is concerned that you're distracted, that this relationship is clouding your strategic vision. The girl from the bookstore, her sister's medical issues, the child, it's a lot of complications for a man in your position. Her name is Olivia. Jackson's voice dropped dangerously low. And my daughter is not a complication. Marcus had the good sense to look slightly abashed, but pressed on. The point remains. Nexus is circling and we need you fully engaged. Maybe it's time to consider what priorities serve the company best. The threat was veiled but unmistakable. Choose between your personal happiness and the company you've built. Jackson dismissed Marcus with cold courtesy, but the conversation echoed in his mind throughout the day. The company was his creation, his legacy. Thousands of employees depended on his leadership. Investors had trusted his vision. Could he risk it all for a chance at personal happiness? That evening, Olivia noticed his distraction immediately. Harper chatted through dinner about her day at preschool, but Jackson's responses came a beat too late, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. After Harper went to bed, Olivia confronted him. What happened today? She curled beside him on the couch, her fingers lacing through his. Jackson hesitated, torn between protecting her from this new tension and the honesty they'd promised each other. Nexus Technologies is attempting a hostile takeover. The board thinks I'm distracted by us. Understanding dawned in her eyes. They want you to choose the company or this relationship. He couldn't deny it. Marcus didn't say it explicitly, but the message was clear. Olivia's hand tightened around his. What are you going to do? The question hung between them, heavy with potential consequences. Jackson turned to face her fully, his decision already made, though he hadn't articulated it even to himself until this moment. I'm going to protect what matters. The next morning, Jackson called an emergency board meeting. The conference room filled with nervous energy as executives and board members filed in. Marcus's expression particularly grim. Jackson stood at the head of the table, not sitting, his posture conveying absolute authority. I understand there are concerns about my leadership. He began without preamble. About my focus and priorities. Let me be absolutely clear. Phoenix Horizon is my creation, my vision, and remains my professional priority. Relief visibly rippled through several board members. Marcus nodded slightly, satisfaction in his eyes. Jackson continued, his voice steady. That said, my personal life is not open for negotiation or board approval. I will not choose between my company and my family. Marcus opened his mouth to object, but Jackson raised a hand, silencing him. Instead, I'm restructuring our executive leadership. He activated the presentation screen behind him, displaying a new organizational chart. I'll remain CEO and maintain strategic oversight, but I'm promoting Eliza Chen to Chief Operations Officer. She'll handle day-to-day operations, reporting directly to me. This will optimize our leadership structure and allow me to focus on long-term vision while maintaining a healthy work-life balance. The room erupted in murmurs. Eliza, a brilliant young executive who had risen quickly through the ranks, was respected but hadn't been considered for such a rapid advancement. Marcus's face darkened with displeasure. Additionally, I'm personally increasing my equity position by 10%. Jackson's announcement silenced the room instantly. I'm buying back shares on the open market, effective immediately. This should adequately address any concerns about my commitment to Phoenix Horizon's future. It was a power move that left no room for argument. By increasing his ownership stake, Jackson was both demonstrating his faith in the company and consolidating his control. The message was unambiguous. He would not be forced into choosing between his personal and professional lives. He would reshape the system to accommodate both. As the meeting adjourned, Marcus lingered behind. You're making a mistake. His voice carried equal parts warning and resignation. Jackson gathered his materials calmly. No, Marcus. My mistake was ever thinking I had to choose. The most innovative solutions come from refusing false dichotomies. That night, Jackson recounted the confrontation to Olivia as they walked along the River City lights, reflecting on the dark water. Restructuring the entire executive leadership to make room for us. She shook her head, a mixture of awe and concern in her expression. That's extreme. Jackson stopped, turning to face her, snowflakes catching in her hair like tiny stars. I spent years building a company that changes how technology works. Why wouldn't I apply the same innovation to how my life works? Because companies are systems you can control. People, relationships. They're messier. Olivia's breath clouded in the cold air between them. You can't just reorganize away every problem. Jackson took her hands, warming them between his. I know that. But I can refuse to accept limitations that don't need to exist. I can create space for what matters. His phone buzzed, a news alert. The business press had already caught wind of Phoenix Horizon's leadership restructuring. Speculation about his personal life would surely follow. The public side of their relationship was about to begin, ready or not. Olivia read the concern in his face. What happens now? Now we stop hiding. Jackson squeezed her hands gently. If we're going to build this life together, we can't keep it in separate boxes anymore. Are you ready for that? The question carried weight beyond the immediate situation. Ready for public scrutiny. Ready for the merging of their worlds, completely ready for a future together without compartmentalization or boundaries. Olivia looked out over the river, then back to him, snowflakes melting on her eyelashes. I think I am. Spring arrived with gentle insistence, melting winter's grip on the city. Trees budded with tender green crocuses pushed through softening earth, and with the changing season came an invitation, the annual Phoenix Horizon Founders Celebration. Traditionally held at the Morgan family estate, it was part corporate milestone, part family tradition dating back to when Jackson's parents first launched the company decades ago. For Olivia, it represented a threshold. Attending meant stepping fully into Jackson's public life, being introduced not just to colleagues, but to the wider circle of influence that surrounded Phoenix Horizon. The business elite, tech journalists, politicians, all would be watching, assessing, judging the woman who had captured the reclusive billionaire's heart. Abigail insisted on helping Olivia prepare her strength, now sufficiently recovered, to take on the role of supportive sister rather than patient. I think the blue dress. She held up a simple but elegant gown they'd found after days of shopping. It brings out your eyes. Olivia studied her reflection, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back. Not because of the dress or the carefully styled hair, but because of the confidence that now straightened her spine. 6 months ago, she would have felt like an imposter preparing to enter Jackson's world. Now she understood. She wasn't entering his world. They were creating a new one together. The Morgan estate glowed with soft lights strung across the garden, flickering gently, like stars as evening settled in. Cars lined the circular driveway, disgorging guests in formal attire. Olivia sat in the back seat of Jackson's car, Abigail beside her, both taking a moment to breathe before facing the crowd. Harper bounced excitedly in her booster seat, already talking about showing Abigail the treehouse her grandfather had built. Jackson opened Olivia's door, extending his hand. His expression as she stepped out contained everything words couldn't express: pride, love, gratitude that she was facing this challenge with him. "You look beautiful." Abigail emerged next, still moving carefully but stronger than she'd been in years. Her recovery wasn't complete, but the clinical trial had worked miracles compared to previous treatments. She took Harper's hand as the little girl bounded from the car. Together, the four of them approached the entrance, an unlikely family formed through chance and choice and courage. Jackson's parents waited at the door. Eleanor's smile genuine as she embraced Olivia. "We're so glad you're here, all of you." The evening unfolded like a carefully orchestrated dance. Jackson introduced Olivia to countless people whose names blurred together despite her best efforts to remember them. Business associates assessed her with calculating eyes. Tech journalists watched their interactions, undoubtedly crafting narratives for their next pieces about the CEO's personal life. Through it all, Olivia maintained her composure, answering questions about her bookstore experience with unapologetic pride, deflecting subtle digs about her background with a grace. Then a familiar voice cut through the pleasant hum of conversation. "Olivia." She turned to find Kimberly standing just feet away, dressed in an expensive dress that seemed at odds with her bookstore salary. The surprise must have shown on Olivia's face. "I'm here with Bradley Winters." Kimberly nodded toward a middle-aged investor chatting nearby. "We've been dating for a few months. I had no idea you'd be here." The undercurrent was clear. Kimberly had landed her own wealthy man a parallel she wanted Olivia to acknowledge. But before Olivia could respond, Harper came running up, tugging at her hand. "Olivia, Grandma says it's time for Daddy's speech." "Come on." Kimberly's eyes widened at the child's obvious attachment, at the casual way she claimed Olivia as her own. The silent victory felt sweeter than any verbal response could have been. As the crowd gathered near the garden center, where a small platform had been set up, Eleanor Morgan appeared at Olivia's side. Catherine used to stand right here. Her voice was soft, meant only for Olivia's ears. For these speeches, it was her favorite part of the evening. Olivia felt a momentary vertigo, being compared to Jackson's late wife standing in her place, filling a role left tragically vacant. "Is that okay?" Eleanor's eyes, so like her son's, held Olivia's gaze steadily. "More than okay. It's healing for all of us." Jackson stepped onto the platform, the gentle clinking of glass drawing silence from the gathered crowd. He looked out at the assembly, board members, executives, investors, friends, but his gaze settled on one small group near the back. Olivia, with Harper holding one hand and Abigail the other, the three of them a living portrait of what mattered most. "I know these nights are usually about strategy and legacy." He began, his voice carrying across the hushed garden. "But tonight I want to talk about something simpler, something more important." He glanced toward Olivia, who stood perfectly still, Harper's small hand warm in hers. "For a long time, I believed I had to build something big enough to protect the people I loved. But building walls only kept people out until someone showed up who saw beyond them." The crowd had gone completely silent, sensing this was no ordinary corporate speech. "This is Olivia." Jackson's voice softened with emotion. "The woman who taught me that love begins with kindness, that being seen, truly seen, is the foundation for everything that matters. She never asked who I was. She just saw a father and a daughter and made us feel like enough." Silence, then soft applause, then stronger. Olivia stood motionless as tears welled in her eyes. Abigail squeezed her hand gently, and Harper whispered, "That's you." Olivia laughed through the tears, nodding. It was the first time in her life she had ever been introduced not as a background figure, not as someone temporary, but as part of something permanent. Welcomed, acknowledged, loved. When Jackson stepped off the platform and reached for her, she met him halfway. "I've never belonged anywhere." Her voice thick with emotion meant only for him. He cupped her face gently, thumbs brushing away tears. You do now. And beneath the lights, the stars and the soft hum of conversation resuming around them, they stood together. No longer from different worlds, no longer guarded, just two hearts that had found their way home. The morning after the Phoenix Horizon celebration, headlines splashed across business publications and social media. Tech billionaire Jackson Morgan goes public with a relationship. The bookstore romance that captured a CEO's heart. Morgan's moving speech introduces new love. Overnight, Olivia Bennet had transformed from private citizen to public figure, her life suddenly worthy of scrutiny, speculation, and endless commentary. She sat at the kitchen island in Jackson's penthouse, scrolling through her phone with increasing discomfort. Images from the garden party appeared on screen after screen. Olivia in her blue dress, Jackson's hand at the small of her back, even Harper holding her hand as they walked through the garden. Each photo felt like an invasion, a theft of moments that had belonged only to them just hours before. Your name is trending. Jackson set a coffee mug in front of her, his expression apologetic. I should have warned you better about how quickly this would happen. Olivia set her phone face down, trying to process this new reality. It's strange. I've been invisible most of my life, taking care of Abigail, working at the bookstore, just existing quietly. Now suddenly people think they have a right to opinions about me. Do you regret it? Jackson's question carried weight, not just about the party, but about all of it, about stepping into his world, about choosing a life that would never be entirely private again. Olivia wrapped her hands around the warm mug, considering. No, but I need to find my footing in this. I won't just be Jackson Morgan's girlfriend or some fairy tale character in a rags to riches story. I need to still be me. 3 days later, a notification from Kimberly shattered the fragile peace they'd been trying to maintain. A tabloid had published a feature titled The Morgan Woman from Abandonment to Billions. Someone had dug into Olivia's past, unearthing painful details about her mother's departure when she was 14, her father's subsequent move out of state, and her struggle to raise Abigail alone. They'd even found her mother, Diane Bennett, now living in Arizona with a new family, who had provided quotes about always knowing my daughter would do well for herself. The article was waiting on their doorstep, delivered by a surprisingly contrite Kimberly. I thought you should see this before someone ambushes you with questions. Her voice lacked its usual sharp edge. They contacted everyone at the bookstore. I didn't tell them anything, but others might have. Olivia's hands trembled as she read the article, rage and humiliation battling within her. They transformed her life's hardships into entertainment, her mother's abandonment into a dramatic backstory for a modern Cinderella tale. Worst of all, they tracked down Abigail's medical records, speculating about connections between Phoenix Horizon's funding and her treatment. Jackson's reaction was swift and merciless. Within hours, his legal team had filed injunctions, sent cease and desist letters, and threatened lawsuits that would bankrupt the publication 10 times over. When he finally returned to the penthouse that evening, his face was set in lines of grim satisfaction. It's handled. They're pulling the story from their website, publishing a retraction, and the editor has been suspended. His voice carried the cold efficiency that had built his empire. They won't bother you again. Olivia looked up from where she sat by the window, her expression unreadable in the fading light. Did you ask me what I wanted? The question caught him off guard. What do you mean, I mean? She said, rising to face him. Did you consider that I might want to handle this myself? That maybe I've been fighting my own battles my entire life? Jackson's confusion was evident. Why would you fight this battle alone when I have the resources to end it immediately? Because it's my life, my story. Olivia's voice rose slightly. You can't just close every door that might let in something unpleasant. Sometimes I need to face things myself. The metaphor hung between them, doors not bridges, openings and closings not connections. Jackson had spent his life building walls and controlling access, while Olivia had navigated a world where doors often slammed in her face but occasionally opened to unexpected possibilities. So what would you have done? Jackson asked, genuine curiosity replacing defensiveness. I would have responded on my own terms. Olivia moved to the kitchen, needing physical activity to channel her emotions. Called my mother myself after all these years, set the record straight about Abigail's treatment, owned my story instead of having it legally suppressed as if I'm ashamed of it. Jackson was silent for a long moment, recognizing a fundamental difference in their approaches to life's challenges. "I'm sorry," he finally said, joining her in the kitchen. "I'm used to solving problems with the tools I have. I didn't consider that sometimes the solution isn't about making the problem disappear." Olivia's hands stilled on the counter. "I know you were trying to protect me, but I don't need a fortress. I need a home with doors we decide together when to open and when to close." The incident changed something between them, not weakening their bond, but deepening their understanding of each other's needs and boundaries. Jackson learned to pause before deploying his resources, to ask rather than assume. Olivia learned that accepting help didn't mean surrendering autonomy. When Jackson proposed that Olivia consider taking a leadership role in the Phoenix Horizon Foundation, the conversation unfolded differently than it might have before. The foundation had been established years ago, but lately operated mostly as a tax strategy with minimal direction. Jackson had been contemplating how to revitalize it to give it genuine purpose. It needs leadership. Someone with vision, with passion for education and literature. Someone who could build something meaningful. Jackson's eyes met hers across the dinner table. "Someone like you." The offer hung between them. Not just a role, but an identity independent of their relationship, yet connected to his world. Olivia set down her fork slowly. "Is this about giving me a distraction from the media attention?" "No," his voice carried conviction. "It's about recognizing what you could bring to an organization that has resources but lacks soul. You understand what books mean to people who have nothing else. You've lived on both sides of privilege. The foundation needs that perspective." Olivia considered his words, thinking of her abandoned education. Her dreams deferred for Abigail's sake. This position would allow her to channel her passion for literature into something larger than herself, to create programs that mattered. But it would also fundamentally change their relationship, adding a professional dimension to their personal connection. "I'd need complete autonomy." Her mind was already racing with possibilities. "No interference, no special treatment because of us. If I do this, I do it on merit." Complete autonomy. Jackson nodded, relief evident in his expression. He'd worried she might reject the idea, or she outright might see it as charity rather than the recognition of her capabilities that he intended. "And I'd keep working at the bookstore part-time," Olivia added, "at least for now. I need to keep one door to my old life open." Jackson understood the compromise she was offering, maintaining her independent life while accepting his invitation to build something new. "Whatever you need, this is yours to shape." The transition wasn't seamless. Establishing Olivia as the new director of the Phoenix Horizon Foundation required navigating corporate politics, board approvals, and the inevitable whispers about nepotism. Jackson maintained professional distance from the process, allowing Olivia to prove herself through her vision and proposals rather than his influence. Her first board meeting was a baptism by fire. 12 pairs of eyes assessed her as she presented her vision, creating literacy centers in underserved communities, partnering with independent bookstores to establish reading programs and writing workshops. The questions afterward were pointed, designed to expose weaknesses in her background or planning. Ms. Bennett, an older board member, leaned forward, his tone condescending. "Your background is in retail bookselling, correct? Not foundation management or corporate philanthropy." Olivia met his gaze steadily. "My background is in recognizing when systems fail people, Mayor Hargrove, in understanding what it means to need help and to provide it with dignity, in knowing the difference between charity that maintains power imbalances and empowerment that disrupts them." The room fell silent. Then Eleanor Morgan, sitting at the far end of the table, spoke up. "I believe that's precisely the perspective this foundation has been lacking, Charles." Her voice carried the quiet authority of the Morgan family matriarch. "The proposal has my vote." The initiative passed with unanimous approval, silencing the skeptics who had questioned Olivia's qualifications. As she left the boardroom, Eleanor fell into step beside her. "They'll underestimate you until they fear you." Her smile was knowing. That's when the real work begins. As spring blossomed into summer, Olivia's professional life took flight. The literacy centers opened in 5 cities, with waiting lists forming immediately. Independent bookstores that had been struggling found new purpose and revenue as community hubs. A scholarship program for first-generation college students attracted national attention and corporate partnerships. But the greatest surprise came from Abigail. Dr. Chen's treatment had produced results beyond their most optimistic hopes. Complete remission of her lupus symptoms, a medical case study being prepared for publication. With her health stabilized, Abigail had applied for and received a prestigious scholarship to complete her degree in London. I got in. Abigail's voice trembled with excitement over the phone. Full scholarship, housing stipend, everything. They want me there by August. Olivia gripped the edge of her desk, her emotions colliding. Joy for her sister's opportunity, pride in her accomplishment, and an unexpected hollow feeling at the prospect of being separated after so many years of constant caregiving. Liv, you're quiet. Are you okay? I'm so proud of you, Abby. Olivia managed blinking back tears. So incredibly proud. You deserve this. That evening, Jackson found Olivia sitting on the penthouse balcony, staring at the city lights, spreading beneath them like a carpet of stars. What's wrong? He joined her, immediately sensing her troubled mood. Abigail's going to London. She spoke without looking at him. She got the Westfield Scholarship. It's an amazing opportunity. Jackson studied her profile in the dim light. And you're happy for her, but sad for yourself. Is that selfish? Olivia finally turned to him. To feel like I'm losing something when she's gaining so much, it's human. His hand found hers in the darkness. You've centered your life around her care for so long. It makes sense to feel adrift when that changes. What if she doesn't need me anymore? The question emerged from somewhere deep, a fear Olivia hadn't even acknowledged to herself. Jackson's response was gentle but firm. Need isn't the only reason to stay in someone's life, Liv. Abigail won't stop loving you because she's flying on her own. She'll just have more to bring back to you. The insight settled over Olivia like a warm blanket. She had been defining her relationship with her sister through necessity for so long that she'd forgotten the possibility of connection through choice alone. Much like what she was building with Jackson, a door freely opened, not an obligation fulfilled. As Olivia's professional presence grew stronger, Harper began showing signs of insecurity. The little girl who had once drawn Olivia enthusiastically into their family circle, now sometimes pulled away, became possessive of Jackson's attention or acted out when Olivia was present. The breaking point came during dinner at Jackson's penthouse. Harper had been unusually quiet throughout the meal, pushing food around her plate rather than eating. When Olivia asked about her day at preschool, the little girl's response cut through the pleasant atmosphere like a knife. You're not my mommy. Harper's eyes, so like Jackson's, fixed on Olivia with sudden intensity. You can't ask me mommy questions. The table fell silent. Jackson set down his fork, clearly caught between disciplining his daughter for rudeness and acknowledging the legitimate emotion behind her words. Olivia felt the statement like a physical blow, all the more painful because she had been so careful never to position herself as a replacement for Catherine. You're right, Harper. I'm not your mommy. Olivia kept her voice gentle, though her heart raced. I would never try to be her. She was very special, and no one could ever take her place. The child's lower lip trembled. Then why are you always here? Why does Daddy like you so much? Jackson started to intervene, but Olivia caught his eye, silently asking him to let her handle this crucial moment. Because I care about both of you, and caring about people means wanting to be with them even when it's complicated or hard. Harper considered this, her small face scrunched in concentration. But what if you leave like Mommy did? The innocent question revealed the fear driving Harper's behavior. Not jealousy, but terror of another devastating loss. Olivia moved from her chair to kneel beside Harper's seat, meeting the child at eye level. Your mommy didn't want to leave you, Harper. She got very sick, and even though she wanted more than anything to stay with you, she couldn't. I know. Harper's voice was small. But what if you get sick too? Olivia took a deep breath, recognizing the weight of her next words. I can't promise I'll never get sick or that nothing bad will ever happen. But I can promise that I choose to be here with you and your dad every day. And I will keep choosing that over and over for as long as I possibly can. Harper studied her face, searching for truth with the unfiltered directness only children possess. Pinky promise. Olivia extended her little finger, linking it with Harper's. Pinky promise. 2 days later, Jackson received a call from Harper's preschool. The teacher's voice was apologetic but firm. There's been an incident. Harper got into an altercation with another child. We need you to come in. Jackson arrived to find Harper sitting small and defiant in the principal's office, a scratch on her cheek and a stubborn set to her jaw. Across the room, another little girl sat with her mother, both looking equally unhappy. What happened? Harper Jackson knelt beside his daughter, concern overriding displeasure. Zoe said mean things. Harper's voice was barely audible. About Olivia. She said Olivia only likes you for your money because that's what her mommy said. So I pushed her. Jackson's heart sank. He looked up at the principal, who nodded confirmation. Both girls have been talked to about physical responses being unacceptable, Mr. Morgan. But I thought you should be aware of the content of the disagreement. That evening, Harper refused to speak about the incident, retreating into unusual silence. It was only when Olivia arrived after work that the little girl finally broke down, rushing to her with tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, I said, you're not my mommy. Harper sobbed against Olivia's legs. I didn't mean it. Zoe was being mean about you, and then I got mad, and then I pushed her, and then I felt bad. And Olivia gathered the child into her arms, carrying her to the sofa where they could talk properly. Shh, it's okay. Let's slow down. She wiped Harper's tears gently. First, I'm not upset about what you said. You were telling the truth. I'm not your mommy. Catherine is your mommy, and she always will be. Harper hiccuped, her crying subsiding. But I want you to be my mommy too. Is that bad? Will my real mommy be sad? Understanding washed over Olivia. Harper's conflict wasn't rejection at all, but guilt. This child, not yet 5 years old, carried the weight of preserving her connection to a mother she barely remembered but desperately needed to honor. Harper listened to me. Olivia took the little girl's hands in hers. Your mommy loved you so much that she would want you to have all the love in the world. Love doesn't run out when we share it with more people. It grows bigger. Really? Harper's eyes, still wet with tears, searched Olivia's face. Really? Olivia brushed a curl from the child's forehead. And you can call me whatever feels right to you. Olivia? Live even just O if you want. We don't need special names to be family. Harper considered this, her brow furrowed in concentration. But what if someday I want to call you something else? What if I feel like it? Then we'll figure it out together. Olivia pressed a kiss to Harper's forehead. There's no rush, no rules, just love. The conversation marked a turning point for all three of them. Harper relaxed into a more secure relationship with Olivia, yet no longer afraid that loving her somehow diminished her connection to Catherine. Jackson witnessed the depth of Olivia's commitment to his daughter, her willingness to navigate complex emotional terrain with patience and wisdom. And Olivia discovered within herself a capacity for maternal love she hadn't known she possessed, not replacing Catherine, but creating something new and equally valuable. As summer faded into autumn, Jackson and Olivia began discussing their living situation, the impracticality of maintaining separate residences when they spent nearly every night together, the challenges of splitting Harper's time between two homes, the desire for a space that belonged equally to all of them. I've been thinking, Jackson traced patterns on Olivia's back as they lay in bed one Sunday morning, Harper's cartoon laughter drifting from the living room. Maybe we should look for a new place. Not the penthouse, not your apartment. Somewhere that's ours from the beginning. Olivia rolled over to face him, studying his expression. You'd leave this place after all the work you put into making it perfect. It's perfect for the man I was. Jackson's fingers brushed her cheek. Not for the man I am now, not for us. The decision led them to a brownstone in a tree-lined neighborhood, close enough to the city for convenience, but removed from its constant pulse. The house needed renovation, but had good bones and character, absent from the sleek modernity of the penthouse. Most importantly, it offered enough space for everyone. Bedrooms for Harper and Abigail, for when she visited from London, a home office for Jackson, a library for Olivia, and plenty of room for future possibilities neither dared name aloud. The purchase finalized quickly benefits of Jackson's resources and connections. Renovations began immediately with all family members contributing ideas. Harper insisted her room be painted yellow like sunshine. Abigail designed a study nook beneath the stairs during her visits home before departure for London. Jackson focused on integrating smart home technology throughout the historic structure. But the most challenging discussions centered around Catherine's presence in their new home. Jackson had preserved many of her belongings, photographs and mementos in the penthouse. Some would naturally move with them, particularly those important to Harper. But the question of how much to bring forward into their new life together required careful navigation. I don't want her to disappear from our home. Jackson stood in what had been their bedroom, looking at the photo of Catherine on his nightstand. But I also don't want you to feel like you're living in her shadow. Olivia joined him, slipping her hand into his. She's part of who you and Harper are. I'd never want to erase that. Her voice was steady, though the conversation wasn't easy. What if we create a special place for her things? Not hidden away, but intentionally honored. The solution they developed was a small sitting room on the second floor with Catherine's photographs beautifully framed, her favorite books on the shelves, and a comfortable window seat where Harper could go to feel close to her mother, not a shrine, but a living testament to her continued importance in their lives. The room became symbolic of their approach to building their blended family, acknowledging the past while creating space for the present, honoring what was lost while celebrating what had been found. Moving day arrived just as November painted the city in muted grays and browns. Boxes filled with merged lives created labyrinths in each room. Olivia's books alongside Jackson's tech gadgets, Harper's toys mingling with Abigail's art supplies left behind during her semester abroad. The chaos of transition surrounded them, but beneath it lay the foundation of something permanent, taking shape. As evening approached, Jackson suggested they take a break from unpacking to celebrate with dinner in their new half-assembled dining room. He disappeared mysteriously for an hour, returning with Harper, who wore a secretive smile that mirrored her father's. Takeout containers from their favorite restaurants appeared on the table, along with a bottle of champagne and sparkling cider for Harper. A housewarming feast. Olivia laughed as she surveyed the eclectic spread. Did you get something from every restaurant in the city? Just the important ones. Jackson winked at Harper, who giggled behind her hand. The ones that tell our story. Olivia recognized the meaning then. Dumplings from the restaurant near her bookstore, where they'd had their second date pasta from the Italian place they'd discovered during a rainstorm, dessert from the cafe where they'd first met. Each container held not just food, but memories, the breadcrumbs of their journey together. As they settled around the table, still surrounded by boxes eating off paper plates because the dishes remained unpacked, Jackson nodded to Harper, who solemnly retrieved something from her pocket. The little girl approached Olivia with measured steps, clearly rehearsed for whatever role she'd been assigned. Daddy says I should ask you an important question. Harper's serious expression nearly made Olivia laugh, but she maintained her composure, recognizing the moment's significance to the child. What question is that, sweetheart? Olivia set down her fork, giving Harper her full attention. Harper held out her small fist, then opened it to reveal a ring. Platinum band, single emerald-cut diamond, elegant in its simplicity. Do you want to be in our family forever and ever? The room went silent. Olivia's eyes moved from the ring to Harper's earnest face, then to Jackson, who had left his chair to kneel beside his daughter. The tableau they created, father and daughter united in this question, squeezed her heart almost painfully. I'm not asking you to be what we've lost. Jackson's voice was steady but thick with emotion. I'm asking you to be what we've found, what we've built together, a family that chose each other. Olivia reached out her fingers, trembling slightly as they brushed first Harper's cheek, then Jackson's. The past year flashed through her mind. The cafe, the rainbow dinosaur, the truth revealed in the bookstore, the accident at the lake, the garden party, all of it leading to this moment, this choice. Yes. The word escaped on a breath, followed by stronger conviction. Yes, I want to be in your family forever and ever. Harper launched herself into Olivia's arms with a squeal of delight. Jackson rose to embrace them both, the ring momentarily forgotten in the tangle of arms and laughter and tears. When they finally separated, he took the ring from Harper's palm and slid it onto Olivia's finger. A perfect fit, as if it had always been meant for her hand. The winter months passed in a whirlwind of planning, not just for the wedding, but for their future together. Abigail returned from London for the holidays, marveling at the changes in all of them. She and Olivia spent long afternoons catching up, their relationship evolving into a more equal partnership of mutual support rather than caregiver and dependent. Planning a wedding while settling into a new home, maintaining demanding careers, and parenting a spirited preschooler proved challenging. Olivia and Jackson opted for simplicity, a spring ceremony in the garden of the Morgan family estate with only family and closest friends in attendance. No media, no spectacle, Just an honest exchange of promises between two people who had already weathered enough storms to know the value of their commitment. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, cherry blossom dotting the trees in the Morgan estate garden with delicate pink. Olivia stood in Catherine's former dressing room. Eleanor had insisted calling it a continuation rather than a replacement, another woman bringing love into the family legacy. Abigail helped arrange Olivia's hair, weaving small white flowers among the loose curls. "I never thought we'd be here." Abigail's voice was soft with wonder as she secured another bloom. "I spent so many years just hoping you'd have a life beyond taking care of me. And now look at you. Foundation director, soon-to-be wife, bonus mom to the cutest kid ever." Olivia caught her sister's reflection in the mirror, saw the health glowing in her cheeks, the brightness in her eyes. We both got second chances we didn't expect. A knock at the door interrupted their moment. Rather than Eleanor as expected, a hesitant figure stood in the doorway, a woman in her 50s blonde hair now streaked with gray, wearing a department store dress that spoke of careful economy. Mom Olivia's voice emerged as barely more than a whisper, her body frozen in shock. Diane Bennett stepped into the room, her hands clasped tightly together. "Hello, Olivia. You look beautiful." The room fell silent, the air suddenly thick with years of absence and unresolved pain. Abigail moved protectively closer to her sister, her expression guarded. "How did you find us?" Olivia finally managed her wedding day joy replaced by a cold nod of confusion and anger. "I saw the article." Diane's voice wavered slightly. "About you and Jackson Morgan. I contacted his office. His mother called me back." "Eleanor." Olivia closed her eyes briefly. Of course, Eleanor would have taken it upon herself to locate her mother, thinking it a wedding gift, rather than a disruption. "I can go." Diane sensed the tension, took a step backward. "I just wanted to see you, both of you." She glanced at Abigail, who had yet to speak. "To say I'm sorry, and that I'm proud of what you've become." The words Olivia had once longed to hear now rang hollow on her wedding day. This woman who had abandoned her daughters when they needed her most now wanted to claim pride in their accomplishments, to insert herself into a day of joy she had done nothing to help create. Yet as she looked at her mother, older, smaller somehow than in her memories, visibly nervous, Olivia felt the sharp edges of her anger softening slightly. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the possibility of it. An open door rather than a sealed one. "You can stay for the ceremony." Olivia's voice was quiet but firm. "We can talk tomorrow. Today is about the family we've chosen to build, not the one that fell apart." Diane nodded, accepting these terms with visible gratitude. "Thank you," she hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I think Catherine would be happy it's you." The comment, unexpected and strangely perceptive, left Olivia speechless as her mother slipped back out the door. How could this woman who had failed so profoundly at motherhood understand something so essential about today's meaning? A soft knock announced Eleanor Morgan, elegant in pale blue, her silver hair swept into a sophisticated updo. She carried a small velvet box, her expression turning concerned as she noted Olivia's shaken appearance. "Is everything all right?" "You found my mother. It wasn't a question." Eleanor's chin lifted slightly, unapologetic. "Family matters, even the broken pieces, especially those." She placed the velvet box on the vanity. "Catherine wore these on our wedding day, and I wore them when I married David." She opened it to reveal pearl earrings, simple but luminous. "We'd be honored if you'd continue the tradition." The juxtaposition was jarring. Her estranged mother appearing minutes before this gesture of inclusion from her soon-to-be mother-in-law. Olivia's fingers trembled slightly as she removed her simple studs and replaced them with the pearls. "They're beautiful, thank you." Eleanor squeezed her shoulder gently. "Family isn't just what we're born into. It's what we build together, stitch by stitch, even when some stitches come undone." The ceremony unfolded beneath a white trellis covered in climbing roses. Jackson waited at the altar, his expression transforming as Olivia appeared at the end of the petal-strewn path. Harper preceded her, taking her dual role with solemn importance, scattering rose petals with one hand while carefully balancing the ring pillow with the other. From the corner of her eye, Olivia could see her mother seated in the last row, a quiet observer to the family her daughters had found without her. The sight might once have filled her with bitterness, but today it felt like closing a circle, acknowledging what was lost while celebrating what had been gained. As Olivia reached Jackson, Harper positioned herself between them, creating a triangle that symbolized what this union truly celebrated. Not just two people joining their lives, but a family cementing bonds already formed through choice and love. The vows they exchanged were simple but profound, acknowledging the unexpected journey that had brought them together and the future they were choosing to build. When the time came for rings, Harper presented them with a flourish that made the small gathering laugh tenderly. Jackson slid the wedding band onto Olivia's finger, joining the engagement ring that already rested there. With this ring, I promise to love you not just in the easy moments, but in the challenging ones. To build a life with you that honors both where we've been and where we're going. To remember always that love begins with seeing each other truly. Olivia's hands trembled slightly as she placed the matching band on Jackson's finger. With this ring, I promise to walk beside you through whatever comes, to help create a home where all of us can flourish, to remember that doors opened freely create stronger bonds than walls ever could. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson leaned down to lift Harper between them before kissing his bride, making the child an integral part of even this most traditional moment. The guests applauded, Abigail wiped away tears, and the new Morgan family stood united beneath the spring sky, surrounded by those who had witnessed their unlikely journey from a rainy day cafe to this garden celebration. The reception that followed maintained the intimate feeling of the ceremony. Tables set beneath flowering trees, string lights waiting to illuminate the evening music playing softly from hidden speakers. Jackson and Olivia moved among their guests hand in hand, accepting congratulations and sharing the joy that radiated between them. Eventually, Olivia found herself face to face with her mother, who had remained at a respectful distance throughout the reception. The moment she had been both dreading and anticipating had arrived. "Thank you for letting me be here." Diane spoke first, her hands fidgeting with her purse strap. "You've built a beautiful life." Olivia studied the woman who had given her life, but not stayed to nurture it. The anger she'd carried for so long had transformed into something more complex. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps understanding. "We all make choices, Mom. Some we can't take back, I know." Diane's eyes filled with tears. "I don't expect to be a part of your life again. I just wanted you to know that not a day has passed that I haven't regretted leaving you girls." Olivia considered this, the weight of years between them, the separate paths their lives had taken. "We're not who we were then, any of us." She glanced across the garden to where Harper was twirling in her flower girl dress, carefree and secure in the knowledge she was loved. "If you want to know the women Abigail and I have become, we can try. Slowly, no promises." It was neither absolution nor rejection, but the opening of a door, left ajar, not flung wide, with the understanding that trust once broken must be carefully rebuilt. As evening settled over the garden, the string lights twinkled like earthbound stars. Jackson found Olivia sitting at a quiet table watching Harper dance with Abigail, the little girl standing on her aunt's feet as they swayed to the music. Happy Jackson slid into the chair beside her, his hand finding hers automatically. Olivia's eyes moved from the dancing pair to her husband's face, taking in the sight of him in the gentle light. The man who had hidden behind hoodies and half-truths, who had eventually shown her every facet of himself, who had become her partner in ways neither could have imagined on that rainy afternoon a year and a half ago. Beyond happy. Her fingers tightened around his. "I feel like we've built something real, something lasting." "We have." Jackson lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles just above the wedding band. "And we're just getting started." Months passed, seasons changed, and their lives settled into new rhythms. The brownstone transformed from a collection of empty spaces to a true home, each room reflecting the personalities of those who inhabited it. Family photos lined the hallway, not just recent images, but ones Jackson had preserved of Harper, with Catherine ensuring his late wife's presence remained honored in their blended family. Harper's vocabulary expanded to include a term of her own creation, Mommy O, which emerged organically one morning at breakfast and stuck. The name acknowledged both Catherine's irreplaceable role and Olivia's equally important but different place in her life. It came with no fanfare, just the simple logic of a child who had found her own solution to a complex emotional equation. Abigail thrived in London, but returned for holidays and summer breaks, her relationship with her sister evolving into a rich adult friendship. Diane Bennett made careful, tentative steps back into her daughters' lives, never presuming, always grateful for whatever connection they allowed. The morning sun streamed through the windows of their bedroom, bathing everything in golden light. Olivia woke slowly, consciousness returning in peaceful waves. Jackson's side of the bed was empty, but sounds of life drifted from elsewhere in the house. Harper's muffled giggles, the clatter of pans in the kitchen, music playing softly. Wrapping herself in a robe, she padded barefoot down the hallway, following the sounds of her family. The kitchen came into view. Jackson at the stove, flipping pancakes, Harper perched on a stool at the island, carefully arranging berries into smiley faces. None of them had noticed her yet, giving Olivia a moment to absorb the scene. This tableau of ordinary domestic happiness that had once seemed impossibly out of reach. Morning sleepyhead. Jackson spotted her first, his smile warming his entire face. "We're making celebration pancakes." Harper spun on her stool, berry-stained fingers reaching toward Olivia. "We put chocolate chips in yours, Mommy-o." And strawberry faces. Olivia crossed to the island, dropping a kiss on Harper's head before moving to greet Jackson properly. The casual intimacy of the moment, being able to kiss him good morning in their kitchen, figures surrounded by family, filled her with quiet joy. Celebration? Pancakes. What are we celebrating? Jackson and Harper exchanged mysterious glances, clearly sharing a secret. Jackson nodded toward the garden doors. "Maybe take a look outside." Curious, Olivia crossed to the French doors that led to their small backyard. The space had been one of the brownstone's selling points. Rare to find outdoor space in the city, especially one with established trees and flowering shrubs. But what greeted her now was something new. A white wooden structure nestled beneath the largest oak tree, its design reminiscent of a miniature library with glass-paned doors and small windows. "What is this?" She stepped outside, drawn toward the curious addition that hadn't been there the day before. Jackson followed, carrying a small key on a ribbon. "Your writing studio." He placed the key in her palm, curling her fingers around it. "You mentioned once that you used to write before everything with Abigail, that you dreamed of being an author someday." The memory surfaced hazily. A late-night conversation months ago, a passing comment she'd hardly remembered making. But Jackson had not only remembered. He'd created this space where that long-abandoned dream might take root again. With trembling fingers, Olivia unlocked the door and stepped inside. The interior was perfect. A desk positioned to catch the morning light, bookshelves lining one wall, a comfortable reading chair in the corner. A laptop sat on the desk, a red ribbon tied around it. "We know you've been thinking about going back to school." Jackson stood in the doorway, Harper peering around his legs curiously. "But Abigail mentioned that, before all that, you used to write stories. That maybe part of you still wants to." Olivia ran her fingers along the desk's smooth surface, emotion tightening her throat. "I haven't written anything in years. I'm not sure I even remember how." Harper squeezed past her father to stand beside Olivia. "You can practice. That's what you tell me when I'm learning something hard. Out of the mouths of babes. Wisdom so simple, it cuts straight to the heart." Olivia knelt to Harper's level, overwhelmed by the child's unfailing ability to distill complex emotions to their essence. "You're right. Practice is exactly what I need." They returned to the kitchen, where pancakes waited on warming plates and orange juice caught the morning sunlight like liquid gold. As they settled around the table, conversation flowed naturally, plans for the day mixing with reflections on the future, laughter punctuating each exchange. In a moment of quiet, Harper looked up from her syrup-drenched pancakes, her expression suddenly serious. "Are we a forever family now?" "Since you got married," Jackson's eyes met Olivia's across the table, silently sharing the weight of this question. "Yes, Harper, we're a forever family, even when we fight or get mad." The child persisted, seeking reassurance beyond simple platitudes. Olivia reached across to gently wipe a smudge of syrup from Harper's chin. "Especially then. Families don't stop being families just because things get hard sometimes. That's actually when being a family matters most." Satisfied, Harper returned to her breakfast, the existential question answered as easily as a query about the weather. But for the adults at the table, the exchange highlighted the journey they traveled. From strangers in a cafe to this morning table bound by promises both spoken and unspoken. Later that day, as afternoon shadows lengthened across the garden, Olivia sat in her new writing studio, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Through the window, she could see the great oak tree that had stood in this yard long before they arrived, its branches spreading wide above the garden. The tree had witnessed countless families come and go, had weathered storms, and seasons had remained steadfast while everything around it changed. Like the oak, love could endure, not by remaining unchanged, but by growing deeper roots and stronger branches, by bending without breaking, by providing shelter through all seasons. She began to type words flowing more easily than she'd expected, the story taking shape beneath her fingers. Not about billionaires or fairy tales, but about families formed by choice, about doors opened and closed, about the courage to build something new from broken pieces. Outside, Harper chased bubbles that Jackson blew into the air, their laughter drifting through the open window like music. Olivia paused in her writing to watch them, these two people who had changed everything. The morning sun cast dappled light through the oak's leaves, painting patterns across their faces. Outside, the city hummed with its endless energy, people rushing through lives that occasionally intersected in unexpected ways. Inside their home, time moved differently, measured not in minutes or hours, but in moments of connection, in the quiet miracle of ordinary days shared with extraordinary love. Olivia looked out at her unlikely family. The billionaire who had hidden behind hoodies to find something genuine, the child who had drawn her in with rainbow dinosaurs, the sister thriving ocean away, even the mother cautiously finding her way back. Different pieces from different puzzles that somehow fit together perfectly, creating a picture none of them could have imagined, but all now treasured beyond measure. What began as a blind date on a rainy afternoon had become the foundation for something unshakably beautiful. A family built not from obligation or perfect circumstances, but from kindness, truth, and the courageous quiet act of choosing one another, day after day, forever, beneath the sheltering branches of the oak that would remain long after they were gone, witnessing all the love stories yet to come.